I forgave my husband's fifth affair on a Monday morning. On Tuesday, I was sitting across from an attorney. On Wednesday, he was laughing with our friends like he had won. And 6 months later, I took everything from him in court. The house, the business shares, the trucks, the accounts, even his pride. My name is Laura. I was 39, living in a small town outside Nashville, where everybody knew everybody. People waved from pickup trucks, discussed other people's marriages at barbecues, and pretended family mattered more than the truth. My husband, Daniel, owned a freight transportation business. At first, it was just one old truck we bought on credit. Then a second one. Then a third. Over 10 years, we grew into a small company with a dispatcher, drivers, a warehouse, and a logo on a white trailer. The name was Harris Freight and Logistics. On paper, it was his business. In real life, it was my life too. I handled the accounts, talked to clients, reminded drivers about paperwork, checked insurance, and answered late-night calls when a load got stuck in Kentucky or someone broke down near Atlanta. I did all of it from the kitchen table, between the kids' homework and dinner. We had 2 children. Emma was 12 and Noah was 9. They adored their father. To them, he was the tall, loud, funny dad who brought home truck stop hats and let them eat ice cream before dinner. And that was exactly why I kept forgiving him. The first time I found out he had cheated, Noah was still in kindergarten. It was a waitress from a roadside diner near I-40. Daniel said it was stupid. One night. Too much beer. No feelings involved. He cried on our front porch. He got down on his knees beside the swing he had hung for Emma himself. He said he would destroy himself if I left. He said the kids would never survive a divorce. I believed him. The second time, it was a woman from a brokerage company in Memphis. She sent him messages after midnight. At first, they were about freight. Then they were about how much she missed his voice. When I confronted him, he said she had pushed herself on him. Our friends took his side that time. Laura, men lose their way sometimes, my friend Megan told me. What matters is that he comes home. I hated that sentence. But I stayed anyway. The third time happened after a big contract with a chain of grocery warehouses. We were all celebrating at a restaurant. Daniel was charming, loud, successful. He kept his arm around my waist in front of everyone, poured me wine, and kissed my temple. That same night, he left to check on a driver. He came home at 4 in the morning. I was sitting on the stairs in my robe, watching him take off his jacket. There was a thin pink smear of lipstick on his neck. He did not even notice it. That was the first time I thought forgiveness could become a cage. But the business was no longer feeding only us. We had drivers with families. We had loans on trucks. We had contracts, insurance policies, taxes, acquaintances, partners. Daniel knew how to talk to people. I knew how to hold everything together. We were the couple everyone thought was strong. At church picnics, younger couples asked us how to build a marriage. At school games, other parents sat beside us. At Christmas parties, Daniel raised his glass to me and said, "Without this woman, I'd be nothing." People laughed. I laughed too. Because sometimes laughing is easier than screaming. The fourth affair was with our bookkeeper, Kelly. That was when I felt truly ashamed. Not hurt. Not angry. Ashamed. Because she sat at my table, drank my coffee, hugged my children at Noah's birthday party, told me I looked tired and needed more rest. Then I found her earring in Daniel's company pickup. He swore it was over. He swore on the kids. He swore on the business. He swore on his father's grave. And I stayed again. Not because I was stupid. It took me years to understand that. I stayed because I was scared that if I left, everything would fall apart. The kids would lose their home. The drivers would lose their jobs. Our friends would choose him. And I would become the woman who failed to keep the family together. The fifth time began very quietly. There was no lipstick. No strange earring. No late-night message I accidentally saw. There was only an envelope. It was lying in the glove compartment of his pickup, between truck stop receipts and an old charging cable. I had been looking for the registration for our insurance agent because one of our trucks had been in a minor accident in Arkansas. The envelope was white with no stamp. Written across it in a woman's handwriting were the words, "For Daniel. Do not open at home." I stared at those words for a long time. My hands went cold. My heart beat so low and heavy, like it already knew there was more inside than just another affair. This time, there was something bigger. I opened the envelope right there in the truck. And the first thing that fell into my lap was a photograph of a little boy with my husband's eyes. I sat in the pickup and stared at another woman's child. The little boy smiled exactly like Daniel smiled. A little crooked. A little confident. Like the whole world had already forgiven him. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "He's 4 now. He asks about you." I read those words 3 times. Then I read them again. Because my mind refused to turn them into the truth. For years. That meant it had not started yesterday. Not after our last fight. Not when the business got hard and I got tired. It meant that while I was packing lunches, paying bills, and smiling at his clients, he had another life. Not just an affair. Not just a mistake. Not just a weakness. A child. I did not cry. That was the scariest part. It was like someone had turned the sound off inside me. I could hear cars on the road, the neighbor's dog barking, and my phone vibrating in the cup holder. But all of it felt far away. The insurance agent's number lit up on the screen. I hit decline. Then I put the photo back into the envelope. Not because I wanted to hide the truth, but because I suddenly understood something. If I stormed into the office and started screaming, Daniel would do what he did best. He would turn my pain into my fault. He would say I was overreacting. That I had ruined the day. That I should have talked calmly. That the kids might hear. That the business could not survive a scandal. And the worst part was, people would believe him. I started the pickup, but I did not drive home. Instead, I drove to the warehouse. Our trucks were lined up outside, white and clean, with the blue Harris Freight and Logistics logo on the side. Once, that sight had made me proud. It meant work, stability, a future. Now it felt like I was staring at a monument to my own blindness. Tracy was sitting in the dispatch office. She had worked for us for 3 years and knew every route and every piece of gossip. When she saw me, she straightened immediately. "Laura, is everything okay?" she asked. I wanted to say yes. The word rose in my throat automatically. Women often say yes when everything inside them is already burning. But I only nodded and walked into Daniel's office. He was not there. On his desk were a phone charger, a repair bill for one of the trailers, and a cup of coffee that was still warm. On the wall hung a photo from last year's Christmas party. We stood side by side, smiling in the sweaters Emma had picked out for us. I picked up his notebook. I did not know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe a name. Maybe proof. Maybe an answer to the question of when my life had become someone else's stage. The first pages were filled with driver's numbers, fuel costs, and delivery notes. Then I saw an address in Murfreesboro. No company name. No explanation. Just a street, a house number, and a small star beside it. I took a picture of the page. Then I opened the bottom drawer. There were folders of contracts inside. I knew all of them. At least, I thought I did. But behind them was a thin black folder I had never seen before. There was no label on it. I opened it and felt the air grow heavier. Inside were copies of checks. Monthly transfers. The same amount, on the first of every month. $1,500. The recipient's name appeared again and again. Melissa Reed. I did not know that name. But that name knew my husband very well. The first check was dated 4 years earlier. Right when Daniel had been expanding routes and driving to Memphis all the time. Right when I was sleeping 4 hours a night because Noah had health issues and the business was barely holding together. I flipped through the documents faster. There were rent receipts, health insurance payments, receipts from a children's store, and one payment that made me sit down. $15,000. Payment note, down payment. I stared at those words and suddenly understood why we had not had enough money to fix the roof last year. Why Daniel had told me to put off my dental work. Why he had asked me not to take a salary from the company for 3 months straight. He was not saving the business. He was funding another family. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. I quickly closed the folder, but I did not have time to put it back. The door opened. Megan stood in the doorway, my friend. The same Megan who had once told me men lose their way sometimes. She saw the black folder in my hands. Her face went pale faster than my heart could drop. And that was when I understood. She knew. Megan did not ask what I had found. That was how I knew. She did not look confused. She did not say, "What is that?" She did not step closer like a worried friend. She just stood there, frozen in the doorway, staring at the black folder like it was a loaded gun. "Megan," I said quietly, "how long have you known?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. That silence hurt worse than any answer. Because Daniel had lied to me as a husband. But Megan had lied to me as a friend. She was the woman who sat beside me at school fundraisers. She brought casseroles when Noah had bronchitis. She helped me fold napkins for Emma's birthday party. She knew where I kept spare candles, painkillers, and the emergency key under the planter. And all that time, she had been looking me in the face while knowing my husband had another child. "Laura," she whispered, "it wasn't my place." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the sentence was so empty it echoed. "Not your place?" I asked. "You told me to stay with him." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing for them. "I thought it was over," she said. "At first, I really did. Daniel said it was complicated. He said Melissa was unstable. He said telling you would destroy the kids." There it was again. The kids. The shield everyone loved to hide behind when they wanted me quiet. I closed the folder and held it against my chest. My hands were steady now. Too steady. It scared me a little. "Did everyone know?" I asked. Megan looked down. That answer was enough. Something inside me shifted right then. It was not rage yet. Rage would have been easier. This was colder. Cleaner. Like a door closing in a room I had lived in for years. Our friends had not been protecting my family. They had been protecting Daniel's image. "How many?" I asked. "Laura, please. How many people knew?" She wiped under one eye and shook her head. "I don't know. A few. Maybe more. He told people you knew and that you two had an arrangement." I felt my stomach turn. An arrangement. That was how he explained my humiliation. He had turned me into a woman who agreed to be lied to. A wife so desperate, so weak, so dependent, that people could smile at me over potato salad and pretend nothing was wrong. I thought about every barbecue, every Christmas party, every church picnic, every time someone had hugged me a little too long or looked away too quickly. Suddenly, all of it looked different. Megan stepped closer. "You need to be careful." That made me look at her. "Careful of what?" She glanced toward the hallway, then lowered her voice. "Daniel has been moving things around." The air changed again. "What things?" "I don't know all of it." "Megan." She swallowed hard. "Trucks. Accounts. Maybe contracts." My husband heard him talking about a new company. Something separate from Harris Freight. My body went very still. The cheating had cut me open. But this was different. This was the business. The money. The future I had built with my own hands. I walked past her without another word and went straight to the file cabinet behind Daniel's desk. My knees felt weak, but my mind was sharp. For the first time in years, I was not asking myself how to save the marriage. I was asking what he had stolen. The cabinet was locked. Of course it was. Daniel never locked that cabinet. Not from employees. Not from drivers. Not from me. I turned back to Megan. "Do you have a key?" She shook her head. I looked at the small brass lock, then at the heavy stapler on his desk. It took me less than 10 seconds to decide. "Laura," Megan said, alarmed. I slammed the stapler against the lock once. Then again. On the third hit, it snapped. The sound cracked through the office like a gunshot. Tracy appeared in the hallway. "Mrs. Harris?" "I'm fine," I said. But I was not fine. Inside the drawer were more folders. Titles I recognized. Insurance. Fuel cards. Payroll. Maintenance. Then, tucked behind everything, I found a sealed packet from a law office in Nashville. My name was nowhere on the front. Daniel's was. And underneath his name was another one. Melissa Reed. I opened the packet with my thumb. The first page was an operating agreement for a new company, Reed and Harris Transport LLC. For a few seconds, the words did not make sense. They sat on the page like they belonged to someone else's life. Then I saw the asset list. Truck 14, Truck 17, Trailer 6, Trailer 9, 2 customer contracts, 1 commercial storage lease. My ears started ringing. Those were not just company assets. Those were the pieces keeping us alive. Truck 14 was paid off. Trailer 9 had just been repaired. One of those customer contracts was the grocery warehouse account I had helped win after 3 sleepless weeks. He was not just cheating. He was building an exit. And he was using the business we built to do it. Megan covered her mouth. Oh my God. I looked at her then, really looked at her. You didn't know this part? She shook her head, crying now. No. For some reason, that made me feel even worse. Because it meant Daniel had compartments for everybody. A lie for me. A lie for Melissa. A lie for Megan. A lie for our friends. Maybe even a lie for himself. My phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. His name filled the screen, bright and ordinary, like he was still just my husband calling about dinner. I let it ring. Then a text came through. Where are you? Another followed 10 seconds later. Don't start anything at the office. I stared at the message. He already knew. I looked up slowly, past Megan, through the office window facing the lot. Daniel's black pickup had just pulled in beside the warehouse. And when the passenger door opened, Melissa Reed stepped out holding the hand of the little boy from the photograph. For a second, nobody moved. Not Megan. Not Tracy in the hallway. Not me, standing there with the law packet in my hands. Daniel stepped out of his truck first. He looked angry, not afraid. That told me everything. A guilty man begs. A man with a plan gets irritated when you interrupt it. Melissa came around the other side holding the little boy's hand. He was smaller than I expected. He wore a blue dinosaur hoodie and carried a juice box. His hair curled around his ears, just like Noah's did when he was little. That was the detail that almost broke me. Not Daniel's lies. Not the money. Not even the folder. It was that little curl of hair. Daniel walked into the office like he owned the air inside it. Laura, he said, low and sharp. We need to talk outside. I looked past him at Melissa. She looked nervous, but not ashamed. That confused me at first. Then I realized she was looking at me the same way I was looking at her. Like I was the woman who had ruined her life. Does she know? I asked him. Daniel's jaw tightened. Melissa pulled the boy closer. Know what? The office went silent. I could hear the hum of the vending machine near the hallway. I could hear one of the drivers laughing outside, then stopping when he saw us through the glass. Daniel gave me that look I knew too well. The warning look. The one that said, don't embarrass me. Don't make this messy. Don't forget what we built. But something had changed in me. I was not the woman on the porch anymore. I was not the woman staring at lipstick on his neck. I was not the woman swallowing humiliation at Christmas parties. I held up the packet. Reed and Harris Transport, I said. That's what we're talking about. Melissa's face changed. She looked at Daniel. You told me she signed off. My chest tightened. What did you just say? Melissa blinked, suddenly unsure. He said you agreed to separate the business. He said you were keeping the house and the kids' accounts. He said this was clean. Clean. That word made me feel sick. There was nothing clean about stealing trucks from your wife while she packed your children's lunches. Daniel stepped toward me. You don't understand business structure. This was for tax reasons. I almost smiled. He had used that tone for years. Slow. Patient. Like I was too emotional to understand numbers, even though I had kept his company breathing through fuel spikes, late invoices, breakdowns, and payroll shortages. Tax reasons. I asked. Yes, he snapped. And you standing here making a scene proves exactly why I didn't tell you yet. There it was. My fault again. Melissa looked between us. Daniel, what is she talking about? He ignored her. That was when I opened the packet again. I flipped through the pages until I found the asset transfer form. My eyes scanned the document fast, almost too fast to breathe. Then I saw it. My signature. At the bottom of the page, beneath Daniel's name, was my name written in blue ink. Laura Harris. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It looked like my signature from far away. The shape was close. The L curved the right way. The H was sharp. But I knew my own hand. I knew the little break before the last S. I knew the way I never closed the A. This was not my signature. I whispered it before I could stop myself. This is insane. Daniel's face changed for half a second. Just half a second. But I saw it. He knew I knew. Melissa took one step back. You said she signed it. She did, Daniel said. No, I said. I didn't. He turned on me then. Not loudly. That would have been too honest. He lowered his voice, which somehow felt worse. Laura, think very carefully before you accuse me of something you can't take back. The little boy hid behind Melissa's leg. And that was the moment I hated Daniel most. Not because he had betrayed me. Not because he had humiliated me. But because he had brought a child into a room full of adult lies and expected all of us to protect him from the consequences. I put the packet on the desk. Then I took out my phone and photographed every page. The transfers. The operating agreement. The forged signature. The asset list. My hands shook, but I did not stop. Daniel lunged for the papers. Megan stepped between us. Don't, she said. He stared at her like she had slapped him. You need to leave, he told her. No, Megan said, her voice cracking. You need to stop. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel looked surrounded. Not by enemies. By truth. Melissa picked up her son. I'm going home. Daniel spun toward her. Mel, wait. She flinched at the nickname. That tiny movement told me he had lied to her too. Maybe differently. Maybe prettier. But still, he had built her life on the same rotten wood he had used for mine. Before anyone could move, Tracy appeared again in the doorway. Her face was pale. Mrs. Harris, she said carefully, I'm sorry, but you need to see this. I looked at her. What? She held up the office tablet. I was checking payroll for Friday, she said. The account balance just changed. Daniel went completely still. And I knew, before she said another word, that the betrayal was not finished. Tracy swallowed. The payroll account is almost empty. The payroll account is almost empty. For a second, I did not understand the words. Payroll was sacred. Even Daniel knew that. You did not touch payroll. That money belonged to the drivers who spent nights away from their families. It belonged to men who slept in truck cabs behind gas stations, missed birthdays, drove through storms, and still answered our calls at midnight. I looked at Daniel. He did not look surprised. He looked annoyed. That was when my fear turned into something colder. How much is left? I asked. Tracy looked down at the tablet. $812. My throat tightened. Payroll was due in 2 days. We needed almost $46,000. Melissa whispered, Daniel. He snapped at her without looking. Stay out of this. The little boy started crying then. Soft at first. Then louder. Melissa carried him out of the office, and I watched her go with a strange ache in my chest. I hated what she represented, but I could not hate the child. Daniel turned back to me. You're making this worse. I stared at him. I'm making this worse? You broke into my files. You humiliated me in front of employees. You're scaring people. I almost did not recognize his voice anymore. Not because it sounded different, but because it sounded the same. That calm, heavy confidence. That tone he used when he wanted the room to believe he was the only adult present. For years, it had worked on me. Not that day. I picked up the black folder, the law packet, and my phone. Then I looked at Tracy. Print the payroll report. Now. Daniel stepped forward. Don't give her anything. Tracy froze. I looked at her carefully. Tracy, this company pays you from that account too. Her face changed. That was all she needed. She turned and walked quickly back to her desk. Daniel grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to leave a bruise. Just hard enough to remind me who he thought he was. Laura, he said through his teeth, you need to calm down. I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back at his face. Take your hand off me. For a moment, he did not move. Megan's voice came from behind him. Daniel. Let go. He released me slowly, like he was doing me a favor. That small touch did something final inside me. I knew, with a strange and quiet certainty, that I would never again sleep beside him. Never again fold his shirts. Never again let him kiss my forehead in front of people so they could pretend we were fine. I walked out of the office with the documents in my arms. Daniel followed me into the lot. The afternoon sun was harsh on the white trucks. Drivers stood near the fuel tanks, pretending not to stare. Everyone knew something had happened. In a town like ours, silence traveled faster than gossip. You walk out with those papers, Daniel said, and you destroy this business. I turned around. No, I said. You already did. His face darkened. You think you can run this without me? That question landed exactly where he wanted it to. Because for years, he had planted that fear inside me. He was the face of the company. He shook hands. He told stories. He made clients laugh. I was just the wife behind the invoices. At least, that was what he wanted me to believe. Then my phone rang. It was one of our biggest clients, Mr. Calhoun from the grocery warehouse contract. I answered before Daniel could speak. Laura, he said, tense. I just got a call from Daniel. He said all future loads need to be routed through a new company. My eyes stayed on Daniel. Did he tell you that in writing? There was a pause. No. He said paperwork was coming. Please don't sign anything, I said. There may be fraud involved. Daniel's face went pale. That was the first time I saw real fear. Mr. Calhoun lowered his voice. Do I need to be concerned about my freight? No, I said. I'm handling it. The words came out before I had time to doubt them. After I hung up, Daniel laughed once. It was ugly. You're handling it? Yes. With what money, Laura? That one hurt. Because he knew exactly where to hit. The empty payroll account. The loans. The drivers. The children. The roof we still had not fixed. He had set the fire, then asked me how I planned to breathe through the smoke. I drove straight to the bank. I did not go home. I did not call my mother. I did not cry in a parking lot. I walked into First Tennessee Commercial Bank holding a folder full of betrayal and asked for our account manager. Her name was Sandra. She had known us for years. She always smiled at Daniel first and asked me about the kids second. That day, she stopped smiling when she saw my face. I need full statements, I told her. Business accounts, linked transfers, credit lines, fuel cards, everything. Sandra hesitated. Laura, Daniel is the primary. I am an owner, I said. And I believe funds have been misused. The room changed around those words. Misused sounded clean. Legal. Smaller than what I felt. Sandra took us into a private office. For the next 40 minutes, she printed pages while I watched numbers turn into a map of my humiliation. Transfers to Melissa Reed. Withdrawals near Murfreesboro. Payments to a second insurance policy. Cash advances from the business credit line. And 3 large transfers marked as equipment deposits. Except no equipment had ever arrived. Sandra pushed one page toward me. This one is unusual, she said. It was a wire transfer for $72,000. Sent 2 days earlier. Recipient, Reed and Harris Transport, LLC. My vision blurred at the edges. Daniel had not emptied payroll because he panicked. He emptied it because he was leaving. That night, I finally went home. Emma and Noah were at the kitchen table doing homework. Daniel was not there. His side of the closet was still full. His boots were still by the back door. His coffee mug was still in the sink. Our home looked normal. That almost made it worse. Emma looked up. Mom, are you okay? I wanted to say yes again, but the word would not come. So I sat down beside my children, placed both hands flat on the table, and said the first honest thing I had said in years. No, I whispered, but I'm going to be. Then headlights swept across the kitchen window. A car pulled into the driveway. For one foolish second, I thought it was Daniel. But when I opened the door, it was not my husband standing there. It was Melissa Reed. And in her trembling hands, she held a stack of documents even thicker than mine. Melissa stood on my porch like a woman who had aged 10 years in one afternoon. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook around the papers. The little boy was not with her. For 1 second, I wanted to shut the door. Not because I hated her, because I hated what she brought with her. Proof. Details. More truth than I was ready to hold. Emma stood behind me in the hallway. Noah was still at the kitchen table, pretending not to listen. I could feel their fear before they said a word. Go upstairs, I told them softly. Both of you. Emma looked at Melissa, then back at me. Mom? Please, I said. That one word did what yelling never could. She took Noah's hand and led him upstairs. Melissa waited until their footsteps faded. Then she whispered, he lied to me too. I stepped aside. She came into my kitchen like someone entering a house after a funeral. Her eyes moved over the family photos, the kids' school drawings, the magnet from Gulf Shores on the fridge. I watched her understand, piece by piece, that I had not been some cold wife Daniel was escaping. I had been his wife. A real one. A tired one. A loyal one. Melissa placed the documents on the table. He told me you two were separated, she said. He said you only lived together for the children and the company image. I did not answer. There was no answer that would not break something. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. He said you knew about Liam. Liam. The little boy had a name. That made him even more real. I sat across from her because my legs suddenly felt weak. How long? I asked. Melissa looked down. 5 years. 5. So the child was 4, but the lie had started before him. Before the photo. Before the checks. Before the down payment. Before the fourth affair I thought I had survived. It had all overlapped. Every apology had been theater. Every promise had been a pause between betrayals. Melissa opened the first folder. He had me sign papers last month. My body tightened. What kind of papers? He said they were for the new company. He said you were getting half of Harris Freight, and we were starting fresh with the other half. She pushed a document toward me. It was another operating agreement. Another asset schedule. Another page with my name on it. This time, beside my forged signature, there was a notarized stamp. I stared at it. Do you know this notary? Melissa shook her head. Daniel brought the papers already signed. The room felt smaller. I picked up the page and photographed it. Then another. Then another. Melissa kept talking, faster now, like if she stopped, fear would catch her. He told me the payroll transfer was a loan. He said Harris Freight owed him owner distributions. He said you were trying to punish him by freezing money. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Even now, even with 2 women at the same table, he had managed to make both of us the villain in each other's story. Then Melissa pulled out one last envelope. I didn't know about this until today. Inside was a life insurance policy. Daniel's name was listed as the insured. But the beneficiary was not me. It was not our children. It was not even Melissa. It was Reed and Harris Transport, LLC. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. That was the part that chilled me. Not because it meant he planned to die. Because it meant he was thinking like a man who no longer saw people. Only assets. Only leverage. Only escape routes. My phone buzzed. A message from Megan. He's calling everyone. He's saying you had a breakdown. Another message came in. He told Jason you stole company files and threatened Melissa. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Daniel did not need truth. He needed the first story. In our town, the first story always stuck hardest. Melissa read my face. What happened? He's starting the public version. She looked sick. I'm sorry. Those words should have made me angry. Instead, they made me tired. I don't need sorry, I said. I need copies of everything. She nodded quickly. You can have them. That night, after Melissa left, I sat on the laundry room floor and called an attorney. Not the friendly family lawyer everyone used for wills and property lines. I called a divorce attorney in Nashville whose reviews said she was calm, ruthless, and impossible to intimidate. Her name was Evelyn Grant. I expected a receptionist. Instead, Evelyn answered herself. I told her enough to make the room go silent on her end. Forged signatures. Business transfers. Empty payroll. A second company. A hidden child. Possible fraud. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you still have access to the company accounts? Yes. Then listen carefully, she said. Do not confront him again tonight. Do not warn him. Do not post anything. Do not text your friends explanations. Save every document. Screenshot every message. Tomorrow morning, we file first. File first. 2 words. But they sounded like a door opening. I slept maybe 1 hour. At dawn, I packed lunches for Emma and Noah with hands that did not feel like mine. Peanut butter for Noah. Turkey and cheddar for Emma. Apple slices in plastic bags. Ordinary things while my life burned quietly around us. Emma came into the kitchen before Noah. She stood there in her oversized sweatshirt, looking older than 12. Is Dad leaving? She asked. I froze with the knife in my hand. Children always know more than we think. They hear tone. They read silence. They collect broken pieces adults drop and build their own terrible pictures. I don't know what your dad is doing, I said carefully. But I know what I'm doing. Her eyes filled. What? I'm protecting us. She nodded, but her chin trembled. That almost destroyed me. Not the affair. Not the money. Not the forged signature. That? My daughter trying to be brave because I had spent years teaching her to survive discomfort quietly. After school drop-off, I drove to Nashville with every document in a banker's box on the passenger seat. Evelyn's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building that looked too clean for a life this messy. She was in her 50s, with silver hair, sharp eyes, and no wedding ring. She read fast. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just fast. Every few pages, she placed a sticky note on the table. Yellow for business fraud. Pink for divorce. Blue for custody. Green for urgent court action. By the time she finished, the table looked like a warning system. Finally, she leaned back. Laura, she said, this is not just a bad marriage. I swallowed. I know. No, she said. I need you to understand. He may have forged your name, diverted marital assets, exposed the company to liability, and emptied payroll while creating a competing entity. Hearing it in legal language made it feel both cleaner and worse. What do we do? I asked. We file for divorce, temporary injunctions, emergency control of business funds, and preservation of assets. We notify the bank. We notify the insurer. And we stop him from moving another truck. I felt my breath shake. For the first time, the fear had direction. Then Evelyn slid one document toward me. Sign here. I looked at the page. Petition for divorce. My name at the top. Daniel's beneath it. After 15 years, it looked so small. I picked up the pen. And for 1 second, every version of myself stood in that room. The woman on the porch. The woman on the stairs. The woman laughing at Christmas parties. The woman finding the photograph. The woman who had stayed 5 times because she thought staying meant strength. Then I signed. Evelyn filed before noon. By 2 o'clock, the bank froze the disputed business transfers. By 3, one of the drivers called me. Mrs. Harris, he said, nervous. Daniel's at the yard with a tow crew. My blood went cold. What? He says he has paperwork to take truck 14 and trailer 9. I stood up so fast my chair hit the wall. Evelyn looked at my face. What happened? I put the phone on speaker. The driver's voice shook. He says if anybody gets in his way, he's calling the sheriff. Evelyn grabbed her coat. Good, she said. Let him. By the time we reached the warehouse, 2 patrol cars were already in the lot. Daniel stood beside truck 14, waving papers in the air. And when he saw me step out of Evelyn's car, his face changed. Not because he was scared of me. Because behind me, Melissa stepped out of her own car. And in her hand was the original document proving my signature had been forged. Daniel stared at Melissa like she had betrayed him. That almost made me laugh. After everything he had done, he still believed loyalty meant silence. He believed women were supposed to carry his lies gently, like sleeping children, and never let them fall. The sheriff stood near truck 14, one hand resting on his belt. Mr. Harris, he said, I need you to step away from the vehicle. Daniel lifted the papers higher. This truck belongs to my new company. Evelyn walked forward before I could speak. No, it does not, she said. Her voice was calm. almost bored. Somehow, that made her more terrifying. Daniel looked her up and down. "Who are you?" "Laura's attorney." For the first time, he looked at me differently. Not with love. Not with regret. With calculation. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He had expected me to call Megan, cry in the kitchen, and ask what I should do next. He had not expected me to show up with a lawyer. Evelyn handed the sheriff a copy of the emergency filing. "There is now a preservation order pending. The disputed assets stay exactly where they are until the court reviews ownership and transfer authority." Daniel scoffed. "Pending means nothing." "It means enough," Evelyn said. "Especially when there is evidence of forged authorization." Melissa stepped forward then. Her face was pale, but her hand was steady. "This is the original," she said. Daniel turned on her. "Mel, don't." She flinched again. I hated that I recognized it. That tiny shrinking movement. That split second when a woman remembers how angry a man can get when his control starts slipping. Melissa handed the document to Evelyn. Evelyn looked at it once, then handed it to the sheriff. Daniel's face hardened. "She's lying because Laura got to her." Melissa's voice broke. "You told me she signed it." "She did." "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. I stepped closer, not to Daniel, but to the truck. The blue logo caught the afternoon sun. Harris Freight and Logistics. The company name looked suddenly fragile, like paint on metal, like something that could be scratched off by one selfish man. "I never signed those transfers," I said. "I never agreed to move trucks. I never agreed to empty payroll. And I never agreed to let you build another life with money from mine." Daniel laughed sharply. "There it is," he said. "You're jealous." That word landed in the lot like a dirty rag. Jealous. Not betrayed. Not robbed. Not humiliated. Jealous. Evelyn touched my arm lightly. A warning not to engage. But I looked at him anyway. "No," I said. "I'm done." Something in his expression flickered. Maybe he finally heard it. The sheriff asked Daniel to step away from the truck again. This time, his voice was firmer. Daniel hesitated, then backed off with his hands raised, performing innocence for the small crowd of drivers watching from the fuel tanks. He was good at performing. That was the problem. By evening, the truck stayed in the yard. The tow crew left. The sheriff took copies of the documents. Evelyn told me not to celebrate yet because court was not justice. Court was paperwork, pressure, patience, and proof. Still, when I got into my car, I breathed for the first time all day. Then my phone exploded. Messages came from people who had been silent for years. "Is it true you attacked Daniel at the office?" "Megan said things are complicated." "Daniel says you're trying to destroy the company. You should think about the kids before making this public." I stared at that last one for a long time. Think about the kids. As if I had not spent 15 years thinking about the kids while swallowing every humiliation. As if my children were safer inside a lie than outside it. When I got home, Emma was sitting on the porch steps. Noah was beside her, hugging his knees. My mother had picked them up from school, but she was inside, giving us space. The house was quiet in that strange way houses get when children have been crying. Emma looked at me and asked, "Did Dad steal from us?" I sat down between them. I wanted to protect them from the words. But I had learned something terrible about silence. Silence does not protect children. It only makes them guess in the dark. "Your dad made choices that hurt this family," I said carefully. Some of those choices involved money. Some involved lies. Noah's eyes filled. "Is he going to jail?" "I don't know." Emma wiped her face with her sleeve. "Did you know about the other kid?" The question took the air from my lungs. I shook my head. "No, baby. I didn't." She looked away. And in that moment, I understood the damage was bigger than marriage. Daniel had not only broken my trust. He had broken the shape of their childhood. He had made their father a question they would carry for years. That night, Daniel came home at 10:43. I remember the exact time because I was sitting at the kitchen table with Evelyn's instructions beside me. The children were upstairs. My mother was in the guest room. Every lock in the house suddenly felt too small. Daniel opened the back door with his key. He looked tired now. Not sorry. Just tired. "We need to talk like adults," he said. I did not stand. My attorney said all communication goes through her. He dropped his keys on the counter. You brought lawyers and cops into our business, Laura. You brought lies into our home. His face twisted. After everything I built? That was the sentence that did it. Everything he built. I stood slowly. You want to know what you built? I asked. You built a company on my unpaid labor. You built your reputation on my silence. You built another family with money I helped earn. And then you tried to walk away with the trucks. His eyes went cold. You'll regret this. For the first time, I believed him. Not because he was powerful, because he was cornered. Cornered men do not always become honest. Sometimes they become dangerous. The next morning, Evelyn filed for emergency temporary control of the company. Daniel's attorney responded by calling me unstable, vindictive, and financially reckless. By Friday, we were in court. Daniel wore a navy suit and the wounded face of a man who wanted strangers to believe he had been misunderstood. His friends sat behind him. Megan was not among them. Melissa sat behind me. That alone changed the room. Evelyn laid out the transfers, the forged signature, the emptied payroll, the second company, the hidden payments. Daniel's lawyer tried to make it sound like business planning. Evelyn made it sound like theft. Then the judge asked Daniel one simple question. Did your wife personally sign the asset transfer documents? Daniel paused. It was less than 2 seconds. But the whole room felt it. Yes, he said. Evelyn stood. Your Honor, we would like to submit the original document and request handwriting analysis. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then Evelyn placed one more page on the table. I had not seen it before. It was a bank security record from the day the documents were notarized. The timestamp showed Daniel entering the branch alone. My name was on the signature line, but I had been 40 miles away at Noah's school conference. Evelyn turned to me, her expression unreadable. And that was when I realized she had not shown me everything yet. She was saving the worst for court. The courtroom went completely still. Daniel's attorney shifted in his chair. Daniel looked straight ahead. I looked at the timestamp on the bank record. Noah's school conference. I remembered that day perfectly. I had sat in a tiny plastic chair while his teacher told me he was improving in math. I had worn a green sweater. I had stopped for gas afterward and bought Emma a chocolate bar because she had a bad morning. I had not been at that bank. I had not signed those papers. And now, finally, my memory had become evidence. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. Your Honor, Mrs. Harris could not have signed this document at that branch. She was recorded at the school at the same time, and we have already subpoenaed attendance records. Daniel looked at me then. Not angry. Afraid. It was the first honest expression I had seen on his face in years. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Harris, I strongly suggest you speak carefully from this point forward. Daniel swallowed. His lawyer asked for a recess. That recess changed everything. In the hallway, Daniel tried to come near me, but Evelyn stepped between us before he could say a word. Not one step closer, she said. He looked over her shoulder at me. Laura, please. This got out of hand. I stared at him. That sentence almost broke something open in me. Not because I wanted him back. Because I finally understood how small he thought all of this was. 5 affairs. A hidden child. Forged papers. Empty payroll. Another company. Years of lies. And to him, it had simply gotten out of hand. No, I said quietly. You got caught. His face hardened, but he said nothing. Within 3 weeks, the handwriting expert confirmed what I already knew. My signature had been forged. The bank froze the disputed funds. The court blocked the asset transfers. Daniel was removed from daily control of Harris Freight until the case was resolved. The drivers stayed. That mattered more to me than anyone understood. On the Friday after the temporary order, I stood in the warehouse with Tracy beside me and told the drivers payroll would be covered. I had secured an emergency credit line using the court order and frozen funds as leverage. My voice shook at first. Then it steadied. Some men looked embarrassed for me. Others looked relieved. One older driver named Carl removed his cap and said, Mrs. Harris, most of us knew you were the one keeping this place running. I had to turn away before they saw my eyes fill. Because for years, I thought invisibility meant weakness. It did not. Sometimes the person no one sees is the person holding the walls up. The divorce took 11 months. Daniel fought everything. He claimed I was emotional. He claimed Melissa manipulated me. He claimed Evelyn poisoned me against him. Then he claimed the business would collapse without him. It did not. In fact, for the first time, Harris Freight started breathing clean air. I cut 2 bad contracts Daniel had kept for ego. I renegotiated fuel terms. I hired a real CPA. I moved every account under dual authorization. No check left that company without a trail. By spring, we had fewer secrets and better numbers. Daniel hated that most of all. The final hearing happened on a rainy Tuesday. I wore a navy dress, low heels, and the necklace Emma had made me when she was 6. It had a crooked silver heart on it. I wore it because I needed to remember what I was really fighting for. Not revenge. Safety. The judge awarded me the house, primary custody, majority ownership, and operational control of Harris Freight, the trucks that Daniel had tried to transfer, and the restored funds from Reed and Harris Transport. Daniel was held responsible for several personal debts tied to the second company. His face went gray when the ruling was read. Mine did not change. People later said I looked cold. They were wrong. I was not cold. I was empty from surviving. There is a difference. Melissa moved 2 counties away with Liam. We were never friends. That would have been too neat, too pretty for what happened. But we did speak once more. She called me after the final hearing. I'm sorry, she said. This time I accepted it. Not for her. For me. Daniel sees the children every other weekend now. At first, Noah refused to go. Emma went but barely spoke to him. I never forced forgiveness on them. I had learned what forced forgiveness costs. One evening, almost a year after that envelope, Emma found me in the office above the warehouse. I was reviewing invoices, drinking cold coffee, and listening to rain hit the metal roof. She stood in the doorway and said, "Mom, do you hate him?" I thought about lying. Then I closed the laptop. "No," I said, "but I don't trust him anymore." She nodded slowly. "Is that allowed?" That question hurt me more than she knew. I walked over and hugged her. "Yes," I whispered. "It's allowed." Sometimes people think the hardest part is leaving. It is not. The hardest part is admitting how long you stayed after you already knew the truth. It is forgiving the woman you were when she had fewer choices, less courage, and 2 children sleeping upstairs. I used to think saving my family meant keeping the marriage alive. Now I know saving my family meant ending the lie. The company still has Daniel's last name on the trucks. I have thought about changing it many times. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I will paint over every letter and start fresh. But for now, I leave it there. Not because it belongs to him. Because every time those trucks pull out of the yard, they remind me of the truth. He built a life out of lies. And I rebuilt mine from the wreckage he left behind. And write in the comments. Can betrayal be forgiven more than once, or does trust never truly come back after the first affair? Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Protect yourself, protect your boundaries, and never let anyone call your pain an overreaction.